Ancient Greece was made up of multiple city-states. The most powerful city-states were Athens and Sparta. Athens was a democracy, and Sparta was an oligarchy ruled by kings. But around 5th century BC, Sparta won the Peloponnesian War, and a pro-Spartan oligarchy government was installed in Athens. This is the rule of the 30. Plato's relatives were members of the 30 Tyrants. But the oligarchy of the rule of the 30 was short-lived, and a democratic regime was re-established in Athens. The new democratic regime punished the pro-Spartans, and in the process, Socrates was executed. He was accused of not worshipping the Athenian gods and corrupting the young. But the real reason was more political. When Socrates drank the cup of poison after he was sentenced to death, there was someone at his bedside with his head down in sorrow. That is Plato. After the death of Socrates, he gave up a life of politics in Athens and left the city. After that, he began dreaming of a hierarchical society like Sparta. He thought that Athens lost the Peloponnesian War because it had a democratic society. So Plato wanted to make Athens a hierarchical society and restore the glory that defeated Persia in the past. This is what Plato thought of as an ideal society. Today's story is Plato's ideal state. Human thoughts change from moment to moment. When you look closely at your own thoughts, constant thoughts arise. Most of these thoughts are about one's own desires, but sometimes you're curious about something or crave for knowledge. And very rarely, you fall into thoughts of moral strife or religious piety. Like this, human mental activity can be divided into 3 areas. The first part of the soul related to reason and intelligence is located in the head. The second part related to will and morality is located in the chest. The third part related to want and desire is located in the stomach. Like this, human mental activity can be divided into 3 areas. Plato referred to the human soul, which is made up of 3 parts, as the tripartite soul. Culture is the outcome of human mental activity. If you categorize culture into big parts, there are academic, religious, and aesthetics parts of culture. The result of reason intelligence is academics. The result of morality, will, is religion. And the result of desire is art. Academics deal with the truth. Religion pursues good. Art seeks beauty. In the end, human mental activity can be divided into the pursuit of 3 things: truth, good, and beauty. Plato thought that the state should have the same structure. Just as humans have a head, a heart, and a stomach, a nation must have a hierarchy of rulers, soldiers, and producers. First, people with strong desire should become producers, that is, peasants or farmers. Desire drives people to work hard. But if one's desire is too strong, there will be problems. So the virtue of a producer is to have temperance, with which he can control his desire to some extent. Next, people with strong will and courage should be soldiers. The soldiers in the city-state at the time were generally civic forces. But Plato thought that they should train a small number of elite troops. The virtue of a soldier is, of course, courage. Lastly, people with strong reason and intelligence should be rulers. Then what do you call a person of strong reason and intelligence? It's the philosophers who know the idea of good. That is why Plato's ideal state is ruled by a philosopher king. The virtue of a ruler is wisdom. It would be difficult for a man without wisdom to become a ruler. But rulers and soldiers are also human beings. Rulers and soldiers also have desires. When a person with desire has power, he or she becomes corrupt. When a ruler is corrupted, no matter what political system they adopt, is bound to be corrupted. So, Plato sets up 2 institutional mechanisms to ensure that rulers and soldiers are not corrupted. The first is the prohibition of private property. Rulers and soldiers cannot own property. Food and necessities are rationed only as much as they need, and they have to live together in dormitories. Second, Plato also banned marriage. It's almost impossible for someone who's married and have children to live selflessly. So even though they are called rulers and soldiers, their lives are almost like slaves. Plato thought that they could endure with pride alone without wealth or family. But there's something that even if you're a ruler or a soldier, and no matter how much pride you have, can't endure. That's sexual desire. Also, in order to maintain a decent population in a city-state, they have to have children in some way. That's why he chose to draw lots. In Plato's ideal state, you choose a partner to have sex with by drawing lots. But Plato also said that operators had to manipulate the lot without letting the others know. So they give superior men and superior women more opportunities for reproduction, and limit the opportunities for inferior men and women. That's how they have a better gene pool. And if a baby is born with a disability or just too weak, he's left to die. So no one knows who their son or father is. That way, rulers and soldiers can suppress individual desires and cannot pass down their power to their children. In this way, the rulers can rule fairly and the soldiers can fight bravely. Now let's take a look at the education system. Newborn babies are brought up together at a nursery. That's where their education begins. There are 5 levels of training. Step 1. From birth to the age of 17, children are mainly engaged in music and physical activities. Since they are still young, they learn a relatively free atmosphere. Step 2. Teenagers aged 17 to 20 must undergo military training at the training center. The important thing is that young people should be educated so they don't fall under the trap of emotion. They shouldn't be overwhelmed by sadness, and they shouldn't burst into laughter easily. And they shouldn't come across literature that evokes desire or lust for drinking. The people who fail here go right to the producer class, and the people who get good grades at the training center go on to Step 3. Step 3. Young people aged 20 to 30 learn math, geometry, astronomy, etc. systematically. It's kind of like a college education. Those who cause trouble or receive poor grades here become soldiers, and those with excellent grades above A go on to Step 4. Step 4. From the age of 30 to 35, people learn dialectic. They learn not to see the world through their senses, but to see the nature of the world through the eyes of reason. You can think of it as going to graduate school and studying philosophy. The people with the best grades here now go on to Step 5. Step 5. Adults from ages 35 to 50 now experience realistic military and political experiences. It's like being a high-ranking civil worker. At this time, they do not take tests, but they are exposed to the public and are evaluated objectively as they experience practical work. After 15 years of public service, by the age of 50, competent and virtuous people will stand out. Only those proved to be fit become the ruler. Now, the ruler rules the state by studying the idea of good. In the end, Plato's education is kind of a vocational education that finds a job that suits one's aptitude. It means that a good farmer can farm, people fit to be soldiers become soldiers, and the right people for politics are left to rule. And when people are finding their aptitude, they are given the same opportunity. So, Plato's idea of an ideal state can be explained by 2 keywords: equal opportunity, work by merit. This is what Plato thought of as a just society. There's a story that Dionysius, the king of Syracuse on the island of Sicily, once called for Plato. He asked Plato to make Syracuse an ideal country. It was a great opportunity for Plato. He had a chance to realize the ideal state that he had only conceived in theory. But Plato's ideal state is ruled by a philosopher king. So the philosopher has to be king, or the king has to study philosophy. So he taught Dionysius I philosophy. At first, he must have studied hard, but that wouldn't have lasted long. Dionysius first must have become a little annoyed because Plato is always talking about goodness or virtue. So the story goes that Dionysius even tried to kill Plato. Luckily, Plato was able to keep his neck attached to his body and return to Athens after suffering. After some time, Dionysius II, the son of Dionysius I, called Plato again. Dionysius II was better than his father. He studied philosophy and idea. But Plato got caught up in a power struggle between Dionysius II and his uncle Dion and was imprisoned again. He was able to come back again to Athens after a time of suffering. Then he went to Syracuse one more time, but he failed again. In the end, Plato entered politics 3 times and failed all 3 times. Plato learned politics from writing, and it didn't work in practice. Karl Popper criticized Plato for dreaming of an utopia. The U in utopia means not, and topos means place. It's a place that's nowhere, something that's impossible. But it's not necessary to disparage Plato's imagination as useless just because he dreamed of something impossible. Human beings are always dreaming of the impossible. The criticism on democracy, equality between men and women, and educational issues suggested by Plato are still worth reflecting on today. Let's wrap up. First, Plato's idea of an ideal state was an hierarchical one. Just as humans have a head, a heart, and a stomach, a state must have a hierarchy of rulers, soldiers, and producers. Plato banned rulers and soldiers from marriage and personal property. Second, Plato's ideal state was where opportunity is equal, but work is based on merit. Third, Plato dreamed of an ideal state, an utopia. But utopia is not something easily realized in reality.